you are the man who stopped the Third World War. Tell us a bit about that. We're talking the Balkans conflict, 1999. What happened?
It's hard to put into just a few moments, but I don't want to bore people. Did you bring the book with you? No, what a shame.
I'll get it.
I will précis this incident, but if you would like to read more...
It's in The Soldier.
It's all in chapters 10 and 11. It's written by this bloke called Jackson, and it's a bargain on Amazon. More seriously, it was 1999, the Kosovo conflict. We were just reminiscing. This time in 99, late May, it was tricky because we had been taking military action against Milosevic and his cronies at that point for the best part of 2 months, and there seemed to be no signs of him conceding. And then all of a sudden, it crumbled, and we achieved what we had set out to do at that point. At that point also, the Russians played their joker and had a bit of fun and games at our expense. We'd all expected a Russian contingent, but the manner of its arrival, and indeed the timing of its arrival, was somewhat unscripted. And there was a difference of opinion, a professional opinion, between myself and my American two-up boss. Not my American one-up boss, we were as one, but one, Wesley Clark, was then the supreme NATO commander in Europe, and he wanted to do things which would, in my view, have taken an undue risk of violence between, on the one hand, NATO forces, and on the other, Russian forces. Now, the Cold War was over, been over a decade. I basically said, General Clark, if you really want this done, you're probably going to have to find somebody else to do it. Fortunately...
This was stopping the Russians take control of the airport, effectively.
Either stopping them or then basically surrounding them and locking them up, basically. It was a bit wild, really, when you think about it. And it had nothing to do with the mission for which we had embarked, which was to prevent any further danger of ethnic cleansing in the Balkans, because the shadow of Srebrenica loomed large. Indeed, at this time, madam, the shadow of Rwanda was also looming pretty large. And therefore, that was our mission. It wasn't to go and have a pseudo Cold War, which might have gone slightly wrong with the Russians. Anyway, I thought I was going to get a P-45, but I didn't.
It was mutiny, really, wasn't it?
No. That would be putting it a little strongly. A difference of professional opinion, I think.
Well, with your commander, though.
Indeed. But fortunately, in democracies, thank heaven, soldiers work for duly elected governments, and both the duly elected governments in the equation on the NATO side, i.e. United States and Britain, both governments, fortunately, saw it the way we did, rather than Wes. But it was a bit high-wire. I mean, it's all in chapters 10 and 11. It's a really good read.
Yeah. I mean, the book is called Soldier,
yep.
But what you're talking about there is avoiding conflict rather than fighting wars, which may surprise a lot of people.
Anybody who's fought wars, or anybody who observed and reported wars, Alex, knows that war is a bloody awful thing, literally and metaphorically. And soldiers know that better than anybody else. Sometimes you've run out of any other options in dealing with evil, and you have to do it, but no illusions about what comes with it. And so if you can do it in other ways, yes.
Yeah, in my experience, very often I've been on visits with prime ministers to the troops, and they always make a speech about how terrible it is of being away from home and away from your families. And you then talk to them, and they seem very happy. And you say, why are you happy? And they say, this is operations, isn't it? This is really making a difference, as opposed to rehearsing for it.
Indeed. and Adam, if I can take this opportunity, let nobody in this room look at British soldiers, indeed airmen and sailors, as some sort of victims. They're anything but that. But there's an element of media coverage which goes down that road. Rest assured, those young men and indeed young women, mainly young, they join because that's what they want to do. And having joined, they then do not want to be left behind when an operation is either underway or imminent. And there are many cases where the battalion next door to this battalion gets very cross because they're going and they're not. I mean, you know. So even though war is an ugly thing, the paradox, which you put your finger on, is that a professional soldier, airman sailor, nonetheless want to be tested because that's what it's a paradox.
You're the son of a soldier.
I am.
And the father of soldiers, I think.
Was, yes.
Was.
Yeah.
Is that a legacy thing?
Yes, but I don't think it's not peculiar to the military. You see it in many professions, whereby medicine is a very, very clear one. You very often get children of medical people following in their parents' footsteps, for example. I dare say the media is not immune from this.
I'm not called Dimbleby anyway. But after Kosovo, which I think was widely seen as a very successful operation, and indeed,
well, we achieved what we set out.
And indeed in the Balkans, although the intervention might have been too late, then came Afghanistan and Iraq, which in a sense your success facilitated. I mean, do you
That's a very interesting point. We probably haven't got time to go through yet another post-mortem on particularly on Iraq. But I think it's fair to say that since the end of the Cold War, interventions in which the United Kingdom had taken part, or indeed in one case solely, Sierra Leone, were largely successful. I mean, the roll call is Bosnia, which went right once NATO got involved. It was bad under the UN, Srebrenica and all of that. Macedonia, Kosovo, Sierra Leone, East Timor, all went pretty successfully. All by and large, and here comes a bit of Clausewitz, all by and large achieved the political objectives for which either the use of force or the threat of force was put forward. Because again, if I just 30 seconds on this, force is not used for its own sake. Force is used in pursuit of a set of political objectives. It's a soldier's job to translate those political objectives into military milestones which, if you get it right, will then achieve those political objectives. And so politicians could be perhaps at least partly forgiven for thinking that the use of force was getting to be a bit of a magic wand, that you use force or you threaten to use force and everything falls into place. Well, if only life was really like that, it would be rather more simple than it actually is. There is no magic wand, and each set of circumstances around which a political decision is approached or indeed made to use force needs to be looked at afresh without prejudice to what has gone before. Otherwise, you're going to get a distorted decision.
And do you think that, if you like, connectivity, what we're talking about, the ability of populaces to communicate with each other, and indeed the ability of the media to cover war live, makes it more difficult, makes it...
Well, it's the world we live in. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of mileage in saying everything will be fine if those bloody journalists just shoved off. I don't say that.
I have heard it said.
Indeed, it was a particularly naval point of view, rather than, I think, soldiers. But it doesn't matter whether you would rather they weren't there or not. That's a pointless position to take. We live in a 24/7 world. We live in a world of increasing immediacy of communication, and you've got to work with that. There's Simple as that.
I mean, it's interesting because you and Charles Guthrie, who you were
Yes.
at the top of the armed services, you were contemporary. I mean, you were communicators. You are known for being political generals who were prepared to go out and make the case to the public to a certain extent.
I'm not sure about the political general bit. I wouldn't really want to be thought of that because it has perhaps other connotations. But I think what you mean, Adam, if I may, is that at the senior military leadership level, you are right in that rather sometimes thin ice area of the political military interface. And as I said a moment ago, in a democracy, we the armed forces, are properly subject to the direction of the government, duly elected. But that does not mean to say that what the government may wish or may sense may not rest completely easily with professional military judgment. And the end game of that is a debate which can sometimes be a bit scratchy. There's nothing wrong in that. But at the end of the day, the military advice is given, it is accepted or not, or modified, and if you don't like what comes out of the government, you have two choices. One is to bite your tongue and get on with it, and the other is saying, I'm off.
For the NATO forces, for the British Army, the Balkans, Iraq, Afghanistan, they were operations outside of area.
Yep.
I want to take you back, if you like, to that period of your career in the 70s when you were operating in Northern Ireland, you were at Bloody Sunday and subsequently at Warren Point, the worst ambush of British soldiers. How different was it as a soldier dealing, as it were, in your own country?
Well, it is. I mean, that in your own country is very important. I mean, the first thing is you can see just about all operations we've done since the end of the Cold War, at the end of the day, as operations of political choice. Northern Ireland was no choice at all. It's domestic territory of the United Kingdom. The responsibility for it rests absolutely with the British government. So that had to be so. But yes, to find yourself with loaded weapons, which you would use if you had to, on the streets of a British town, and Northern Ireland I include in British, that's what it's partly been about, was at first a rather strange experience. But again, it's the politics. Northern Ireland is not a religious conflict in my view, but only superficially. I'll go that far. It was a difference of politics. It was a difference of culture. It was a difference of who you saw yourself to be, where you thought you'd come from, who you felt you are, and how you saw your future. And there was, of course, rather differing views on that. That is a political problem. It's not a military problem. It's a political problem. And therefore, it can only have a political settlement. But what we were able to do for those 38 long years, 38 years less a fortnight before somebody picks me up, a long time, was to hold the ring in terms of the security situation to allow, eventually, thank heavens, a political settlement to emerge. The Good Friday Agreement and what followed. Inshallah, Northern Ireland will not go back to where it was.
It's probably not a question necessarily good and evil, but I imagine in Northern Ireland, with perhaps the exception of Bloody Sunday, there is a greater inhibition on your own soil against the use of force, is there?
In whatever situation, and obviously Northern Ireland was, soldiers are subject to the law. In a democracy, again, and thank heavens, the rule of law, which we have, and perhaps we take a little for granted, is in fact, in my judgment, part of the bedrock of this country and similar democracies. And where you don't have the rule of law, or where the rule of law, so-called, is what some local thug of a warlord says it is, that's not where we want to be. So Soldiers are always subject to the law. Now, which law is an interesting one. In Northern Ireland, it was domestic law. When operating at greater range, it's international law, Geneva Conventions, etc., etc. But there were, in the early days of Northern Ireland, mistakes were made. There was perhaps a less than complete and careful judgment about the use of force in this very difficult and volatile situation, and mistakes were made. But what we do, I don't want to get too technical, but is to translate the law into a set of rules of engagement which soldiers can understand. They're on a card, the famous yellow card, and if they stick to those, they'll be okay.
You're retired now. I just wanted to ask you finally about the armed forces of the future. Some people now say, well, in the future, the armed forces are going to consist of people in bunkers of either sex, controlling robots of one kind or another, whether drones or battlefield robots. What do you say to that?
We are in a, as ever, but it seems to me it's accelerating a time of great change. We have the economic difficulties. We have the defense budget has taken a proportionate hit, along with most, but not all, of other areas of public spending. But it begs a bigger question. And I don't think this country of ours does strategy very well. In fact, I'm not sure it does it at all. It's very good at tactics. By strategy, an overworked word which all of you people, I'm sure, will use every day, several times a day. That is not what I'm talking about. This is really grand strategy. Best perhaps exemplified by the question, where does the United Kingdom wish to be on the world stage in 25, 30, 40 years' time? What will that world look like? And short of the second coming, presumably the tragic tendency of the human race from time to time to settle its differences by violence rather than by peaceful political means will not have gone away. What will future conflict look like? Technology is advancing at an exponential pace, and it seems to me inevitable that greater reliance will be placed on what technology can do, almost especially where it reduces risk to the human being, as democracies are very, very casualty sensitive. But what is future conflict going to be like? It's a very difficult one to call. But when we think back over my service, there were 3 wars. The Falklands, where basically the decision was on the battlefield, as they're known to us as Gulf I, Gulf II. Removal of Saddam Hussein after he'd invaded Kuwait, and don't forget that's where it all started, way back. They were short, sharp, militarily decisive. The Falklands was also politically decisive. It was one of those rare instances where the political outcome, absolutely at the end of the day, relied on success or failure on the battlefield. Gulf I, Gulf II, politically decisive, militarily decisive. Gulf I, not politically decisive. They're short, sharp, but we've been on operations for years and years and years, but they're not wars in that sense. They are these difficult interventions. They are Pace, Donald Rumsfeld, nation building. There to try and help to achieve a more stable country or indeed region. Very difficult in the very volatile circumstances we have, particularly in the Middle East. And that, to use Rupert Smith's very evocative phrase, is operations amongst the people. You can't do that with a robot. You have to be there, because the battleground is not for some range of hills or some great geographical feature or whatever. Most of the battleground is for people's minds, their attitudes, their wishes, their desires, and to try and help them get it better.
And our time is up, but I want to ask you one final question, and the answer is not a bestseller on Amazon, all right? What would you like your legacy to be, looking at your working life?
I would hope, I think any soldier would hope this, that however long or short you spent your soldiering time, when you have gone somewhere with a mission to achieve, that you have actually, despite all the ups and downs, you've actually made things better and more stable and given a more hopeful chance for the future. And for some of my examples, this extraordinary roll call of expeditionary operations we've been doing, that holds good. For some, I think it might be in Chou En-lai's famous answer to the significance of the French Revolution, that it might be far too early to tell.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Sir Mike Jackson.
Thank you.